quorum of the Budget and Finance Committee, and we have the chair of the ITGA Committee. What we'd like to do, because trying to save time of these joint committees, is to go with item 1, then go into closed session on items 2 through 10, so that we can, and then come back with items 11, 12. And so, colleagues, if we could agree on consent items 13 and 14, to move those so that we can move folks.
I'll second that or make a motion.
Okay. And on 13, we have some new information from the CAO on some controller's instructions that we will make sure that the clerk has.
Okay, good.
So you can just give them to the clerk. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
Erica has
You
them.
don't have to read them.
No.
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 You don't have to read them.
I don't have to read it?
No.
No.
Just give it to the clerk.
I already did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then also on item, let's see, I get my notes here. And then also on item 13, if we could ask the CAO to get with the clerk and address the issue of the general fund impact on this report, so we get a clear idea of what factors are contributing to that impact, and so that could be a part of the committee report. Item 14, if we go consent there, we'd also like the clerk and the CAO to get together on and the city attorney to get together on the issue of the amount of expenditures on outside counsel, whether they believe they will stay within budget for the rest of this fiscal year, and also if we could have a comparison year-to-date compared to last year's expenditures on this account. So we could add those two things and move item 13 and 14 on consent. Also, colleagues, for the Budget and Finance, we have 4 items that are workers' comp cases that comply with the issues of state law, and if we could move 6, 7, 8, and 10 on consent, we could basically reduce closed session time, because there's...
I'm just going to vote no on them.
Okay. So if we can do that, if there's agreement on those 4, we can move those on consent. Okay, we'll move those 4 on consent with a 3-to-1 vote on the workers' comp cases. And so we now will go to deal with the joint committee, and Mr. Cardenas with ITGA. You can open up with item 1, and you have some cards here.
So item 1 is communication from the CAO relative to a series of proposals and opportunities to refine and strengthen Los Angeles city government, with specific consideration of the following 2 proposals. First one is performance audit of the Department of General Services Department Asset Management Division.
Okay. General Services, item 1. CEO.
Good afternoon. Maria Cardenas with the CAO's Office, Municipal Facilities Division. On March 18th, our office released a report on redefining and strengthening LA government. One section of this report presented various proposals to assess city practices to identify savings opportunities. Specifically, a performance audit of asset management is proposed. Along with many other city operations, asset management staffing has decreased during the past few years. At the same time, we recognize that asset management function is critical to the city. We propose a performance audit to identify how the city can most effectively carry out its asset management duties within our financial constraints. We recommend that the audit be performed under the purview of the Municipal Facilities Committee, and that the results come back to council for implementation.
Thank you. GSD, anything you'd like to add it before we ask some questions?
Yes, general services, of course, would definitely like any kind of performance audit to be done. We've had some before. Actually, in fact, we had a performance audit done in 2003 by the Controller's Office, a financial and compliance audit of sale of surplus property, and a financial and compliance audit of lease expenditures. Those audits were performed by then Controller Laura Chick. We've probably completed all of the recommendations except for the ones that required either funding and/or policy changes. The ones that we have completed is a 20-year master plan for the city's real estate and assets. It's been updated. It also required for us to update it every 5 years. In addition, we revised the nonprofit policy, we revised the historic core policy, and we already have expanded our professional services real estate contract to incorporate more responsibility with our real estate advocates. As far as funding and policy changes, which the audit had recommended, we have not been able to move forward on those mainly because of funding restraints. For example, we were asked to create and maintain an accurate inventory of all city property, not only the ones that are under council control, but also the proprietaries, DWP, airports, and the harbor. That undertaking would cost a little over $2 million. In this tight economic time, it would be very difficult to do that.
Wait a minute. If you were to take on that responsibility for the properties within the proprietary departments, would the proprietary departments be giving money to GSD for your services?
No, they would not.
Okay. So it was an idea without the funding.
An idea without the funding.
How about CRA? I mean, CRA properties.
CRA properties were not considered at that time. As we've now seen, the landscape has changed. General Service now actually has 2 properties that were under CRA authority. So that creates a different dynamic. We may, depending on what happens in Sacramento, that may be part of our inventory that we'd have to look at. In addition, we wanted to look at consolidating joint use facilities. Again, that would require space planners and a lot of money to undertake that study. And also managing the disposition of city real estate, which would include an in-house policy team, which again would include additional people to be on staff to create policies to bring back to the MFC, which ultimately would take it on to the city council. And then the other policy change that the audit had recommended was that the sale of surplus property, the policies where the council would have significant control over that, they had recommended making some policy changes to that so that the Department of General Services and/or an outside entity would be able to sell more surplus property. At this time, General Services does contract out quite a bit of property, quite a bit of its services. We have a title companies that we use, First American Title Company and Chicago Company, who does our title services. We have about 6 real estate professionals who give us advice: CBRE, Stahlback, Robin Ellis, Jones Lang, LaSalle. In addition, 2 of our large properties are managed by CBRE, and that's a Fig Plaza and the Public Works Building. And then we also have a myriad of appraisal companies that we use right now. If you look at just our budget, even though it's $30 million, $31 million, we contract out at the tune of about $9 million. Our water and electricity account is $5 million, and our leasing account is $15 million, which leaves about $1.3 million in salaries. So at this point, we're probably at a stage where if we were to undergo some type of study to look at contracting out, we may be at the maximum amount of staffing that you need to do that, and probably would need some more. But right now, again, we entertain any type of study that will help us do anything more. But again, that also would cost additional funding to undertake that.
So it's my understanding it's about $2 billion worth of real estate in our city's portfolio?
A little over 4.
4 billion?
Yes.
Wow. And how many square feet it's in the hundreds of thousands, millions? What?
It's in the millions, yes.
In the millions. So, but the in-house capacity that we've afforded your department is approximately how many dollars for staffing inside the department, not contracting out?
1.3.
1.3 million?
Yeah.
How realistic is it for anybody to expect your department to continue to manage that many assets, that many parcels, that many active parcels, with that budget?
I think the CAO is correct. It'll be very, very difficult for Department of General Services to continue to maintain at those staffing levels, at the level that everyone's enjoyed for quite some time.
Okay. So, again, what's the reason why the CAO is suggesting that these audits take place? What's the end effort?
Would be to look at the functions that GSD is performing and to determine if it's being performed most cost effectively. There may be some sections of the work that asset management is performing that should be contracted out. There might be other areas where they would need additional staffing. But in looking at the overall structure of asset management, the number of facilities that we have, the lack of information that we sometimes have on restacking, on where people are moving to, where they're moving from, how they should move, it's clear that we need to do a study of that, of those functions.
Now, we're concerned because it could be that people aren't necessarily doing their job, or that perhaps it probably points more in the direction of maybe we're pretty thin right now when it comes to in-house staff. What was the effect of ERIP on this segment of your department?
We lost about 35 to 40% of our staff.
35, 40%. One of the previous audits recommended that this asset management team should have how many workers or how many in-house folk?
Well, we were at 33, and they recommended back in 2003 that we increase the amount of staff. And I
think it was at least a dozen more that they had recommended in that audit. Yeah, so you had 33 at one time, and an audit in 2003 recommended that the department should fortify itself with perhaps another additional 12 staff. How many staff do you have right now?
22.
22. And since 2003, for example, have your responsibilities and/or square footage, has it gone up since 2003, or pretty much gone down?
It's gone up. And if what happens to CRA happens, it could go up substantially.
Mm-hmm. So what's the timeline of this? What's the guesstimated timeline of such an audit for us to get a third-party picture through this audit? I mean, months, possibly a year, 18 months before we get back?
It would be, if it gets approved, it would be within the next fiscal year, probably 6 months.
From the time that we actually give them the authority and responsibility to commence,
Yes.
right? Okay. So in the meantime, GSD is just going to have to make do unless we somehow in this budget process, we figure out a way to help the department have more resources.
Yes.
Okay. Anything we should be aware of? Any shoes dropping in this area that we should be aware of right now?
There's quite a few, but if you want a specific report on concerns within asset management, we definitely could come back with that.
But please put that forward, and obviously that document will become a public document, and it'll also be good for any particular analysis or audit, whether it's an analysis during the budget process or an analysis for future auditing. So if you could provide certainly the Budget Committee with that, because it pertains to dollars, I'm sure, when it comes to solutions, and then also the ITGA Committee when it comes to policy considerations.
Okay.
Reggie, let me just ask on the issue of the number of buildings, and I think that the CAO is accurate, and it's something that the department has asked for a long time in the sense of what's the proper standards, but I fully support that we go forward on an audit, and I want to make sure that when we do the audit, that all of our inventories are part of it, because I know for a while there, we were dealing with looking at our buildings and then found we had a separate list for nonprofits that were being dealt with differently than our regular structures. So we really need to have that full analysis of all facilities that are within the general fund departments at least. And again, we could deal with the proprietaries, I would assume, as a separate issue, but certainly we need to know what and how we're going to manage them. I think about 4 or 5 years ago we asked, and I believe we made an impact on reduction of leased property because we purchased Big Plaza and we had a stacking mechanism to move resources into that area with as leases came up to continue that process. I understand now that the law firm that's there is now asking to expand their resources, so that kind of puts a crimp because they help pay the note on that building. And so we just need to make sure that we have as wide a breadth of what we're dealing with. I think the report I remember on the nonprofits, if we leased it at almost minimal cost, it was something like 10 or 15 million a year we could get just on rent. And so all of that I believe has to be in a form of a report that we know that the assets of the city are being managed and we're not selling stuff off at the low end of the market and just on a whim or filling a budget gap, but that we're actually having a managed program as to the resources that we're using, or moving people into those instead of lease spots, or what do we do, or what, and I know we don't have a definitive policy, but all of these buildings that we seem to recover after they have basically fulfilled their life, all of the fire stations that are still out there under some label other than that they're retired fire stations, and we're paying the utilities, we're paying the repair, all of those things I think have to be part of that audit and study, so we get a full sense of the impact on the city's budget, but also where are all of our resources. So I would hopefully, as we move forward, have as in-depth an analysis as we can, so we can make decisions now and in the future.
Okay, and I'm not certain, so is General Services doing this audit, or?
No, I think it's something that the CAO is recommending,
Okay.
and I'm sure that we're talking outside resources to do that audit.
Okay.
Great.
Well, we haven't got a budget for this yet, so we have to put it in this year's budget to do that, or have the city controller put it on her.
No, we have requested dollars in order to do the audit, and so hopefully in a few weeks you'll see something in the mayor's proposed budget on it.
Yeah, obviously, we need to know that. Good morning, good afternoon. How many personnel are we talking about when you shake it all down that an RFP would be talking about bringing on?
Again, you mean for the audit? Or
No,
for
for the follow-on activities. Private sector connections you're talking about.
Again, this is an idea that came out of the CAO's office, so I'm not certain where we're going with this.
I see.
Okay.
And how do you feel about it in general, as the general manager of $4 billion worth of assets?
Well, I'm not general manager, but
Well,
my general manager's here, so I.
no, but I mean, from your perspective. Where's the general manager? Where is he? In the back. In the back. Come on up.
I know, exactly. He was doing just fine till I know.
I'm his backup. No, we're happy to have individuals to look at our organization and see how we can better perform our jobs and look at the assets of the city of Los Angeles, because it's a very, very, valuable portion of the city assets, and we need to look at it and see if there are ways to do better. We're more than happy to do that. The most important thing is providing us the resources and the funds to make sure that we can do the best job that we can. As he was saying, back in 2003, we had 33. Actually, he says 22. No, it's down to 19. So we're between 40 to 45% less than we had back then, and we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have. But we're more than happy to sit down and work with the CAO and see how we can do this better for the best interest of the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I forgot to tell you got laid off this morning.
Yeah. Well, the only thing we hope that you incorporate that. I know that at the end of the day, that city employees, we may be the best bargain you can get, the price as opposed to the private sector. I think that's what you may find out.
Find out.
Okay.
Fred?
Yeah, if we implement this, do we know whether we're actually going to be eliminating current jobs in City Hall, and if so, how many, and if there are some, whether we're expecting to retrain those folks and put them in other positions?
I think we're really not going to know until the study comes out and what the specifics are, and we'll come back to you in advance to let you know if there's any possibility of any layoffs or any impact on employees.
And have you talked to the coalition about this yet? And have
Not yet. I will definitely give them a call and let them know about what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, big one.
Thank you. We have one card filled out for this segment of item 1. I don't know if I should take this into my pharmacy or what. I can't read this person's writing. Wiseman? Okay. Well, then, you're legit. You're legit. You're a doctor already.
Thank you.
Can't read your writing.
However, today I'm not here as a physician.
Okay.
Just want you to know that you're safe from that point of view. At any rate, I'm here as the Secretary of the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates, and I'm here to remind you that one of our principles in our revenue generator section regarding the general services was to encourage the occupancy of distressed and vacant commercial property of both large and small business owners, and to reconsider the ownership of all of our properties, perhaps as much as 3 billion of them. Many of them are held in fiefdom by a number of different departments and are not being allowed to be delivered back to the General Services Department for possible auction. How much there is should be part of the study. How much is really unneeded property is a analysis sorely needed. I have some of the data to work on now. I'm going to try to find more of it. You'll have 2 studies, one that you do and one that the budget advocates do. We won't charge you for that. And I think we're at least as good at bargaining as the General Services Department. Thank you very much. I think this is a matter to be considered as possible increase in revenue for the city. Mr. Smith, when you a while back asked me what did I want to take the money from in order to put the money to, first of all, I want to get the money to put it to there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for your recommendation of one-time income, not ongoing income. Whenever we sell an asset, that's a one-time boon to the general fund or wherever those funds go to. But one of the things that I want to warn us as policymakers is that, especially when you look at Chicago, when they did a 75-year lease of some of their assets, they got, I think it was about $2 billion or so. And then in less than 3 years later, they're right back where they were. They're upside down on their budget. One-time funds were misutilized, in my opinion, to handle ongoing expenditures, so therefore they didn't fix anything. So when I think of those recommendations, yes, we move some assets around. Yes, we might sell some assets here and there or what have you, but to look at it as a boon to our issues of when it comes to budgetary matters, I think that we need to focus more on ongoing budget matters and fixes rather than one-time fixes. I know I'm not on the budget committee, but having been a former real estate broker and businessman myself, I think it's important that we remind ourselves of that. Any more questions on this segment? Okay. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to what is labeled as 1B, which is relevant to the Information Technology Agency.
This is regarding outsourcing IT infrastructure.
Again, outsourcing, in-house outsourcing. Budgets are continuing to tighten. Departments, as we just realized, just one segment of the General Services Department had at one time, very recently, 33 employees handling the matters at hand. With an audit, it was recommended that they add 12 bodies. Now not only did that department not grow by 12, that particular department and that segment is actually down to 19 individuals trying to handle all of that work.
And it's my understanding that this particular department is having similar issues when it comes to the number of people to handle the amount of volume of responsibilities. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm Jacob Buxer with the Office of the City Administrative Officer. Item 1B is the CEO proposal to look at outsourcing IT information technology infrastructure. It's one of the white papers that were released on the general topic of looking at alternative service delivery models for city services. The proposal is that the Information Technology Oversight Committee evaluate the possible benefits of outsourcing or looking at alternative ways of getting IT infrastructure, including data centers, data storage, data networks, and help desk and desktop support. We thought that it's possible. We looked at these because we thought there's possibilities of getting perhaps a better level of service for lower price, specifically because, as you mentioned, Councilman Cardenas, the city service levels have been strained by the cutbacks that have occurred over the last few years. In addition, because of the somewhat decentralized nature of the provision of these services within the city, we have had a hard time taking advantage in some cases of economies of scale. So it may be by consolidating through an outsourced entity or in some other way, we could get a better price for these services. And in addition, there's an active market in the private sector for these infrastructure services. So what we wanted to do, what we proposed, was to basically initiate an RFI, request for information process, to basically put it out there that see if there are entities available that could provide these services, and get a sense of what the service levels would be like and what the prices would be like. The ITOC, the Information Technology Oversight Committee, which is chaired by the CEO and has on it the CLA and mayor, would work with all the impacted departments and obviously closely with ITA to release those RFIs and evaluate the responses that came back, and to report back to council for opportunities in these areas.
Now, this question to the general manager, Randy, when it comes to this discussion of outsourcing, is outsourcing something that you enjoy doing, or something that is perhaps considered because of circumstances and resources?
Randy Levin, General Manager of ITA. Good afternoon, Councilman. No, certainly outsourcing is not something that we enjoy doing, nor is it something that, we have embarked upon really in the past. However, our circumstances have changed radically in the last 4 years. The amount of infrastructure that we have is increasing, the age of the technology is increasing, and the staff has radically decreased. And what we know is that we are strained, we're below capacity to be able to respond to all of the issues that we have in the infrastructure. And if we have issues, we know that affects productivity or operations of other city departments. And so it's gotten to the point now where we've lost so many people that we can barely keep the ship afloat. On top of that, what's exacerbating some of it is our circumstances is that our main data center is also experiencing a lot of issues. It is in the bottom of 20 some odd stories. It's having power problems, air conditioning problems. It's having floods. And it's vulnerable, that building, to an earthquake. And as we had seen recently in Japan, I don't think we want to necessarily be in that situation. So all of these factors are pointing to us saying, we need to move out of this facility. And in order to do that, we either need to build a new facility or go into somebody else's facility. And building a facility is extremely expensive and not cost-effective given our current financial environment. So what is more cost-effective is going to other people's data centers to either move the equipment and or operate our existing equipment, and we'll look at combinations thereof in order for the city to have continuity of operations.
Do you want to add anything? All right. Well, I'm going to make a motion later involving the Information Technology Oversight Committee. And I think it's important that we understand that this isn't the first time that the department is having to evaluate and unfortunately deal with the recommendations that might seem a bit extreme. But the fact of the matter is, budgetarily, we're in extreme times. And I appreciate you pointing that out, Randy, that you have less personnel, but you have more responsibilities, not only more responsibilities in the number of units, et cetera, but also you have more responsibilities when it comes to the older the units are, or the older the equipment is. It requires more people time in order to deal with them, and then to keep them running, to keep them so that we can have a productive workforce here in the city. I appreciate your presentation. I don't have any questions at this moment, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I would just like to say that I think this is, under the budgetary concerns, the only way that we can survive. And probably even if we're in better financial times, this should have been a consideration on some of the issues that overwhelm the department on short bursts of projects. And so I think that it puts us in a position to look forward to the future, what should be the mainstay of the department in the sense of what they should concentrate on, how many people should be there to make policy and correct the kinds of activities that are going on for the city. But the actual work being farmed out, again, may be the least costly, and also the fact that we're more consistent. And this is one of those departments that cannot afford the fluctuations of the city's budget. They have a job on an ongoing basis to provide a certain service, and if you don't give them the funds, they can't provide the service. And technology can only go so far, and periodically you have to revamp that technology and upgrade it, and you still need people. We're not robotic yet, and so it's a matter of looking towards how we get the balance of resources outside, but also maintain city policies and some structure in the internal process.
Committee members?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what you said, Randy, is clear, is the concern. Do you have any sense of what kind of number of folks we would be bringing from that end into the private sector versus if we kept government folks and engaged them and so on?
We're really not sure. We've got to go through this whole study and really take a look at it in more detail, because in some areas we have people doing multiple jobs, so we need to try and figure that out. In other cases, if technology is consolidated, maybe we don't need as many people. So it's, it really is the devil's going to be in the details here as we go through this analysis.
And what's our sense of timing for this analysis?
I think it's going to take us about at least 3 to 6 months to ferret out all the details and get to a really good point of view on what it is we should be doing.
Thank you.
And I have sort of the same questions I asked on the last item. If we wind up cutting back on employees, can we retrain them to do other necessary work, or are we just laying them off?
I think we'll have several options. We'll certainly need to talk to the unions. We will also need to talk to city attorney. But as a technology person in this day and age, you have a lot of options. It's not just that this is the only place you can ever work. Some people have asked to go to whatever firm or firms that we may choose. So they may get a better career path and get more training by going to a vendor or vendors. Some may choose to be retrained, and I think that's a personal choice because you have to want to be retrained in another technology. So I think that there is a variety of options out there, and certainly we're going to want to engage individual discussions on what's best for all of our folks, because we're going to also need to maintain a certain level of staffing internally as well.
And you haven't talked to the unions yet on this, right?
No, we have not.
Okay. Thank you. But it is part of the process. Should we embark in this direction, obviously those discussions would take place.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have 2 public comment cards on this item 1B. First one is Joe Karaman. And the second comment card is Sharon Johnson. Please come up. Okay. Joe, please state your name. You may begin.
Joe Carmen, Executive Director, EAA. This outsourcing information technology report, the report says we just got it in the last day. The report says that the city no longer has adequate resources to replace, maintain, or support this infrastructure in a manner that ensures a high level of access to the city's critical systems and data. EAA is sensitive to this reality. In the course of the city attempting to balance the budget, though, on the backs of employees by downsizing, layoffs, and furloughs, this has created the situation we're in. Randy Levin, the GM herself, said that they've lost people, their staff has been downsized, and they can't keep the ship afloat. Well, that's not because it costs more to do it with these people that are the employees. Now that it's been downsized, I didn't hear that cost comparison. I heard that because they were downsized, they couldn't do the work anymore. There's a market that provides, and again in the report, there's an active market that provides outsourced IT infrastructure services at a price below the city's current cost. Until an analysis is completed and provided for comparison, this is a premature foundation. There's really a jumping ahead that we will save money. Outsourcing may, again, the report, outsourcing may provide guaranteed level at a consistent price. Guaranteed in May. This kind of goes to some of the other things, promises that were made with billing for the ambulance service contracted out. Promises made, not kept about saving money. Google email. Promises made, not kept about consistent quality. And the last thing I want to add is that in an MOU with employees, you have a fixed cost. You know what you're going to get. You're going to get fluctuation if you go to a contractor and you get cost overruns and you don't know where that's going to go.
If you don't mind, Joe, I'd like to ask you a question. Are you aware or familiar with the fact that when it comes to this particular department, there are too many examples where individuals have left this department and actually have gone to the proprietary department and are seem to be doing a fine job over there, but they're leaving holes in this particular department, and this particular department's having a hard time rehiring people to fill that specific need, that specific technology knowledge.
Could that be, and I haven't examined the issue, but could that be because there are problems in the classification scales? We know that with the different contracts for city employees, there's been compaction and moving of the classification wage scales. I haven't examined it yet, so I don't know why that's happening, but I don't know that any of it does.
So when you examine that, that'd be interesting to see what some of your findings are. But there is one fact of the matter is, for example, if somebody leaves this department with the same knowledge, with the same abilities, and they go over to the Department of Water and Power, they could be making as much as 30 to 40% more with the same exact resume. And with all due respect, when and if some of those responsibilities eventually end up being handled by a third-party provider, then when that third-party provider loses a person, if they're going to adhere to their contract, they may send a different face over to the city to continue to render those services, but it's not that black and white. When somebody actually leaves as an employee, we've made it, policymakers have made it very, very difficult for departments to go ahead and hire, especially with hiring freezes, and then they have to explain themselves, they have to go through an entire process, and not that they shouldn't go through the process, but that's one of the problems that we have with many departments, that we've cut them so thin that it makes it hard for them to regroup when they have such an occurrence where somebody leaves their job.
Let me ask you, would you take the time to meet with the CAO as they create the RFI, so that many of the concerns you've mentioned can be included as people respond to it?
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
My name is Sharon Johnson. I am a voter and taxpayer in the City of Los Angeles. I am a systems programmer for Information Technology Agency and a member of the board of VAA. I have worked almost 30 years in the IT field in the public sector, supporting both universities and mission-critical public safety systems here in the city. And I also have met family members who are in the IT consulting business, and I'm well aware of the kind of money they make. My concern is that back in the Reardon administration, an entire study was conducted to completely replace departmental personnel with consultants, and the result was that they found that the department was actually being run more efficiently than what could be obtained by contracting out. So we have here something on the agenda that's highly conceptual in nature, and I do have experience with project-based consultants. And what can happen with project-based consultants is that taxpayers are paying an hourly rate twice or 3 times or 4 times greater than what they're paying for employees. And this person can become totally key and have the management of that project under a tight hold. Indispensability is not good for the taxpayers, and I still believe that the department will have more rapid response, flexibility in assignment, and better service by retaining employees for core infrastructure support. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and there's certainly a lot of truth in the perspective you just shared with us, but it really is a matter of going along with what you just said. I mean, nobody wants to be captive to a third party or any party, but it's getting to the point right now when it comes to this particular issue of IT within the City of Los Angeles and with many government entities, it gets to the point where it's my kingdom for my mission-critical system to be up and running now. And that's what we're having a problem with. We've reduced the personnel from this particular department. It was upwards of 700 and some employees. Now we're dealing with close to 400 full-time equivalents with the furloughs and stuff. So the bottom line is we are captive in more way than one right now. But what's most important is, can we keep the ship afloat when it comes to our IT, certainly our mission-critical responsibilities. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment, too, for those that are interested in item 1A and B. I think it's important to realize that what we're recommending, or what the CAO is recommending, is a performance audit for general services and an RFI for ITA function. So we're not approving the transition of anything. It's a matter of getting material that will answer many of the questions that you have, just as we have. But the only way we're going to get that information is to go through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that, what we have before us is item 1, segmented in A and B. My committee will move approval of the CAO's recommendations in today's report on today's agenda.
We have a consensus for Budget and Finance to move item 1A and 1B as recommended by the CAO. Okay. Both committees have a joint report. So that we can...
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That moves us to
That would take us on 2, which is a closed session item.
2 and 3 are consent, closed session, but 3 has a card.
2 has a card. So we're going to go through these cards before we go into closed session. On items 2 and 3, have we announced the items?
Item 2 is an oral report from staff regarding efforts to resolve federal criminal justice information system compliance issues under city contract number C-116359 with Computer Science Corporation for email services. Would you like me to read 3?
On item 2, we have a speaker, John Simpson. And on item 3, we have Russell Brown. Go ahead, John.
I'm John Simpson from Consumer Watchdog. Item 2, as I understand it, is going to be a report about the failure for Google and the CSC to live up to their promises in regards of delivering appropriate security, for the LAPD's email system. And I'm sad to say that we expressed considerable skepticism about this initially and didn't think those things were in place adequately, and the record has borne that out. And what's particularly troublesome to us is what seems to be a pattern on the part of Google to overpromise and underdeliver. I have a draft of a notice of deficiencies that apparently was sent some time ago to Google, saying that these failures are wholly unacceptable to the City of Los Angeles. CSC and Google have repeatedly committed to meet particular deadlines on specific dates, only to reveal at the last minute that the set of deliverables dates will not be met. CSC and Google's behavior goes beyond a mere failure to communicate in a timely manner, and instead, on several occasions, has risen to the level of misrepresentation. I think that's pretty serious, so I hope you do take this up. I'd like to see more of it in a public session than a closed session, because I think the public has a right to know what's going on. I'd like to add just one other thing. It's not just the City of Los Angeles that Google is making false promises to and making misrepresentations to. There were just recently released unsealed documents in a suit between Google and the U.S. government. And in this suit, it suggests, the Justice Department says that Google has held itself out to have FISMA certification when they have not had it for the government cloud, which is a very, very serious charge. Thank you very much.
We had one more person I called up, Russell Brown.
And this was on the card for item 3?
Item 3.
And item 3, I'll just read, was continued from October 25th, 2010, and the city attorney reports relative to settlement discussions in the case entitled the Latino Museum of History, Art, and Culture versus the Latino Theater Company.
Good morning. My name is Russell Brown. I'm Executive Director of the Historic Downtown Business Improvement District and also with the Downtown LA Neighborhood Council. The LATC is in our district. They've been an amazing partner. As you remember, the LATC was a closed facility that the city sort of took back and in 2006 awarded it to a partnership of both the Latino Theater Company and the Latino Museum. What you have before you is sort of a failure of that partnership. I'm here to testify in support of the Latino Theater Center. They have been an amazing partner in the neighborhood. However, the Latino Museum has almost been nowhere to be found. Just in doing research for today, I found 2 articles in 3 years on Latino Museum. One was the announcement 3 years ago that they were hiring a part-time person. The other one was an article in the Downtown News of the failed partnership in the lawsuit. The city, both partners have asked for the city's help and the council's help more than 2 years ago, and that has not happened. If you don't resolve this matter quickly, both partnerships will fail, and the theater center is close to failing. You cannot have partners that one partner has no outreach, no programs, nothing going on, is not paying the bills, and yet they're still sort of squatting. Literally, when I looked at their newsletter for the highlights of last year, what I saw from the museum was trips to Bolivia, some sponsorships in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian, and almost no programs downtown at all. The LA Theater, the Latino Theater Center Company, on the other side, was nominated for the Ovation Award for Best Season for last year, for 2009 and 2010. They have the LA Critics' Choice Award. I recently saw Bonded, and it got standing ovations. It's been an amazing partner. We have the Art Walk once a month. They have 20,000 people there, and the Theater Center has been a very active community partner. So please help us resolve this for the good of both partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
We will, let's see, we're going to go in closed session on items 2 and 3, 4, 5, and 9.
And Mr. Chairman, on the public record, I have to recuse myself on all items dealing with Google Corporation due to his conflict of interest, so I'll be standing out.
Budget and finance issues, and we resolved all of the closed session items that were on the agenda. So we'll go to item 11.
Item 11, yes, which is a CO report, city attorney report, and ordinance relative to establishing a citywide administrative citation enforcement program under the management of the Office of the City Attorney and creation of a special fund entitled Code Compliance Fund.
Okay, thank you. Let me get public comment first, and then, I'm sorry. Let me ask Lisa Sarkin.
Mr. Chair, I know there's one member that has to leave first, so I wonder if you would ask Marcia Sells to speak first, so we won't lose her.
Come on up. We can fill up all 4 seats. Marcia, then we got Lisa Sarkin, Barry Johnson, Jeanette Turner. Where's Marcia?
I'm Marcia.
Okay, why don't you start?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councilmember Koretz, for giving me the opportunity to speak first, because I do have to leave. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Marcia Sells. I live in the Holmby Hills neighborhood of West Los Angeles. I am a member of the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council, and I am founder of the Coalition of Homeowner Associations for Council District 5. However, today I speak on behalf of myself regarding ACE. I support the ACE ordinance and Councilmember Koretz's amendment. They offer a new plan for much-needed enforcement of codes that should routinely enforced previously but have not been. The amendment is good because it seeks to expand the pilot program into a meaningful test of the ACE process. I think you'll hear some valid concerns raised, and I think that we need to address these concerns. I suggest that the pilot program be independently, thoughtfully, and thoroughly analyzed, including a complete review of the process, its effectiveness, and achievement of goals, purpose, and intent. This assessment should include community input with a survey of those who were cited to assess how they were treated and to ensure that due process was provided. Since the concerns over ACE are long-term, this assessment process should be implemented on an annual basis for the life of ACE. We cannot sit idly by and do nothing while the city's quality of life is sliding downhill fast. So I ask you to accept ACE and the amendment. However, the independent evaluation of a reasonably sized pilot project, would help ensure operational effectiveness. Therefore, I urge the committee to accept the ordinance with the Koretz amendment so that we have a viable pilot and to include it as part of the ACE operations and that be a comprehensive, independent system of assessment. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Sarkin. I'm with the Studio City Neighborhood Council. I'm also the CD2 appointee for the Ventura Cahuenga Boulevard Corridor Specific Plan Review Board. The Studio City Neighborhood Council has been unable to take up, as of yet, a motion from the SCNC Government Affairs Committee supporting the ACE ordinance. The motion will be on our April board agenda. Speaking personally then, I fully support the efforts of the city attorney to have a new approach for enforcing the Los Angeles Municipal Code with the ACE ordinance. It should be enacted with full enforcement on all departments that are listed within it, so that a new approach to enforce the Los Angeles Municipal Code can be accomplished. The ACE ordinance will pay for itself by halting the current abuse by those cited who ignore the citations. The ACE ordinance will even the field between those who abide by the law and those choosing to break the law who never end up going to court because no judge is going to have, will bring it in to the criminal court system, which is the only remedy that we have now. The ACE ordinance must be moved forward to the City Council as soon as possible. Thank you.
Hi, Barry Johnson. I'm a member of the Government Affairs Committee of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, and I basically want to echo everything Lisa Sarkin just said, and I think the City Attorney's Office, once and for all, needs some teeth to go after repeat offenders. Thank you.
Before you get started, let me just ask Jack Allen, David, is it Garfinkel, and Haldis Topo to come up.
Hello, Janet Turner, Chair of Pacific Palisades Community Council. On March 24th, the PPCC voted to support the objectives of the ACE in concept. We urgently need this type of ordinance. A self-funded enforcement process we think will work very well. We ask, however, that the pilot program include much more than just animal services. That said, we are concerned about some of the details of implementation. We hope that in the final ordinance that you would make sure that all unintended consequences would be revisited and that you would assure that there are safeguards in place to protect the innocent from abuse or unreasonable costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Jack Allen, President of the Palisades Preservation Association. I'm a former city attorney and also a city prosecutor, and I've had considerable professional experience in code enforcement. Our association voted to urge your committee to vote against the enactment of the proposed ordinance in its present form. The board feels that the ordinance has too many problems in it and will not, by itself, improve code enforcement in the city. And it will add just another layer of enforcement that will lead to more confusion and perhaps to more cost. On its face, the ordinance looks like it will solve the city's code enforcement problems. However, on close examination, it did not live up to anyone's or everyone's expectations. The 15-page analysis of the ordinance that we have provided to you concludes that the primary reasons that current code enforcement is not working in the city are, first, that there is a substantial shortage of enforcement officers. ACE ordinance will not remedy this. Second, there's a lack of an efficient collection system to collect fines, penalties, and fees. The ACE ordinance will not remedy this. Third, problem is that the inability of the city attorney to prosecute home misdemeanors for minor offenses, which most code violations are. All the ACE ordinance does is take the city attorney off the hook. And it appears from reading of both the city attorney's report and the CAO's report that this is the reason that the ordinance is being principally urged by the city attorney, to relieve its office of having to prosecute code violations. The analysis which we have provided shows you many problems in the ordinance, and we ask that the council read this carefully. We've provided a copy to you, and you will see that these problems need to be corrected.
Who did you provide the 15-page document? We got it here. Okay, thank you.
My name is David Garfinkel. I'm the president of the Tarzana Property Owners Association and on the Government Affairs Committee of the Tarzana Neighborhood Council. Unfortunately, neither of those organizations have had a chance to meet since...
Good job.
I was wrong. Thank you very much.
As long as you haven't met, what the heck?
Right. Since the announcement of the meeting was so quickly, so I'm really speaking for myself. I support the proposed ordinance with the Koretz amendment. We're in a situation where there's almost no enforcement of city ordinances. There's lack of people, there's lack of will on some of the inspectors, and I think that this ordinance would go a long way towards dealing with the non-compliance of all the ordinances that are listed in the Koretz amendment. It's a far easier, far less costly method than the very cumbersome process right now. The process right now sometimes ends up with a decision by the courts that this is just too trivial to tie down the court docket, and so it goes unpunished, and scofflaws just get away with violations time after time after time. When things are resolved, it sometimes takes a year for a resolution. So this would be a much simpler, much more expedient method of handling these problems. We do have one suggestion, however, and that is a concern of vigilante action of neighbor against neighbors, and our suggestion to alleviate that concern would be a grandfathering of existing conditions. Those conditions are never going to be prosecuted anyhow, so let's grandfather the situation as it stands now and go forward with this ordinance. And we urge you to very quickly move this out of the committee to the full city council. Thank you very much.
Just a second, let me ask Flo Chapelier, Jay Handel, and Dr. Weissman to come up.
Thank you. My name is Huldis Topple. I'm speaking as the president of the Marcus Knowles Property Owners Association, representing 1,250 homes in Pacific Palisades. I'm also the vice chair of the Palisades Community Council. The Marcus Knowles Property Owners Association supports the revised ACE proposed ordinance with the aim to enforce the Los Angeles City Municipal Code in all applicable areas, with special focus on building and safety, zoning, noise abatement, and animal services codes. The lack of enforcement of laws and ordinances leads to diminished order in a community and eventually turns neighbor against neighbor in an effort to self-enforce. It will adversely affect not only the safety but also the quality of life of the residents in our community and the city of Los Angeles in general. Enforcing our laws becomes a moral imperative. And we urge this committee and later the council to support the ordinance and move it forward. Much has been said already about the concerns of the implementation of ACE and the possible consequences to perhaps the innocent. I believe that we can trust our elected officials to not only implement a worthwhile ordinance, to fix a problem that is paramount throughout the city, but I think we can also trust them to exercise judgment and good management to address and fix the problems that invariably will raise themselves when we implement a new process. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
My name is Flo Chapelier. I'm a member, alternate member on the Brentwood Community Council, and I speak on behalf of Nancy Friedman, the president of Brentwood Community Council, to say that we highly support the amended version of Councilman Koretz, and we would be really happy that the program be implemented in full force.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask two more. Noah Weiss and is it Diane? Is it Rabin? You both come up.
Yes, my name is Jay Handel. I'm here today both as the chair of the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates and as one very angry citizen who's probably had about enough. In our white paper, we're very clear. Our quality of life has gone to hell. Our budget continues to spiral down. We continue to lose services, we continue to lose personnel, and we finally have the ability to do something proactive. One of my committee members says, today is the new normal. And it is the new normal, and now's the time for the day of reckoning. It's time for the council to man up and start putting things back in order, from the budget to code enforcement to quality of life to all the rest of our city. When I hear them talk, our people here talk about collections, this won't work because our collections are terrible. They're right. Our collections are terrible, and the white paper addresses that. This has to be part of a picture, a bigger picture that has to be corrected in our city, because we've got a lot of problems, a lot of systems that are failing. But this is one piece that, if implemented, is the beginning of fixing a very broken system in our city. And not just animal services, because that just sets this thing up to fail. Let's put it on all of those items according to Councilman Koretz's amendment that'll give it an opportunity not to fail, but to actually work in our city. But you have to do it in conjunction with some of the other fixes that we've talked about, including collections. This ordinance will reduce staff time. We'll be able to put our city attorneys on things that are more meaningful, that will give us a better ability to have a better quality of life, like chasing parking lot operators that owe us $70 million, as a for instance. So we urge you today to move forward, as per our recommendation in the white paper, with the amendment from Councilman Koretz. Thank you.
Mr. Wolfberg, would you come up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Daniel Wiseman, also a member of the Neighborhood Council Budget Advocates. And both personally and as a member of that Budget Advocate group, we very strongly support this program. It has a whole series of features, but I want to simplify for the time being. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of debt that is put through a process that you put major debts to be processed, and it doesn't make any sense. The motion that is parallel to this to bring the Office of Finance and the Office of Treasurer together should be linked then with the Office of the City Attorney and with an idea that we have had in the past but need to revise, and that's the community courts. What we're dealing here with is with a series of minor violations. I added up probably 40 or 50 of them. They're in the police department, a number of minor violations, the Department of Building and Safety, Housing, Public Works, certainly the Department of Transportation, where parking fines are supposed to be collected for $280 million, and they're said by the controller to be collected for $140 million. The ambulances are next, which are said by the controller to be $90 million that we're losing every year. Those and the police department are the big numbers. Well, we need to address this, address it quickly, make all of these citations, bring them down from the major courts into something we can manage, and this city needs to be good businessmen. We're going to have to hire some new people who are very unlike the people we have now. And we're going to have to do a much better job. But I think this should be the start of that improvement. We certainly support your interest. We hope you will put this through as quickly as possible. We're here to help you do so.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm very much against this ACE proposal. I think that while people are justifiably have a right to be angry because the system isn't working, it's not clear why the system isn't working at this point in time. We don't know. There's no facts developed. Part of the CAO's report said the city attorney is supposed to develop a study of deficiencies. They were supposed to talk to the departments. There's no study that I've seen, and the departments were not cooperative. This is very premature. I think it's a lot of hope and hype, and I think it's way too early for prime time. What we're talking about specifically is that there's no openness and transparency at all in any way, shape, or form in this proposal. Secondly, again, the current system exists. Why is ACE necessary? It sounds as though we're imposing a greater level of bureaucracy again on a situation where we don't know what the cost is going to be, what's the opportunity cost, what city attorneys are going to be involved in this that are going to be taken away basically from something else. More importantly, this compensation fund that they're talking about here, that's something that's totally unique. That's not in Santa Monica, it's not in Culver City, that's not anywhere. That is very dangerous when you have the concentration of power in an enforcement official such as the city attorney or any city attorney. They should not have control over that. At anything, it basically should be the controller. Where are the checks and balances? Santa Monica doesn't have a Section 245. We do. That is lacking in this situation. This is an opportunity, however, where we can generate some efficiencies. One, people don't pay. You know what? Lien their business license. Lien their property. That will probably solve 50, 60, 70% of the problems. Challenge the neighborhood councils. You have an opportunity here. And by the way, I would encourage this committee. This is a 908 situation. That's provision of the charter that says the council can appoint neighborhood councils to hold hearings and develop the facts as they come in through the city. We can develop this basically bottom up relative to having neighborhood councils basically be involved. But you lien their property, you require a certificate of compliance before any business is sold, before any house is sold, and you record it against the property. That the Santa Monica does. And more importantly, you include a mediation component here that will again resolve probably 80, 90% of these problems. And then the really significant, difficult ones, those will basically filter up. We're not ready to go. I urge further consideration on this and a further evaluation before you move this to council. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Rosen, Chair of the Encino Planning and Land Use Committee, but we haven't had time to vote on this yet, so I'm here appearing for homeowners of Encino, Jerry Silver, and the Encino Property Owners Association, EPOA. We support this motion. We thank Councilman Koretz for bringing this amendment forward. The ACE provides an alternative to criminal prosecution by authorizing police officers, law enforcement officers, and other law officials to address low-grade quality of life violations with real-time enforcement. It is important that the committee adopts Councilman Koretz's amended version of the CAO report. Thank you.
I'm George Wolfberg. I'm an elected at-large member of the Pacific Palisades Community Council, also on their land use committee. I represent neither of them today. I'm also president of the Santa Monica Canyon Civic Association. We have about 1,100 residents in Small Canyon next to the city of Santa Monica. So we know about some of these things, bandit cabs for one. I'm here to support the motion of Councilman Koretz and urge you to incorporate that and to move ahead. And one slight suggestion is on 112.04 is a very complex section, A, B, and C. The C contains a couple of the words that I hate to see when I'm reading an ordinance, notwithstanding the above. So you have to make sure that you apply it to section C. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the staff. Someone from the city attorney's office.
Ida Rubio with the CAO's office.
Jason Klein, CAO's office.
Tina Hess with City Attorney's office.
Okay.
Maybe you could give us how did this ordinance come about and was generated, so we get an idea of.
Okay, so to start off with the background on this, the City Attorney's office submitted a draft ordinance to this committee requesting that a citywide administrative citation program be established, and it would be for the enforcement of code violations. This enforcement program would be optional for departments, so they could use it if they felt a situation required this type of enforcement. The ordinance also outlined administrative procedures related to issuance, servicing, appeals, and hearing. It provided authority to impose administrative fines for code violations per the fee structure. It authorized departments to be reimbursed for the enforcement and administrative costs incurred by their department, and it created the establishment of the Code Compliance Trust Fund, which was to be an escrow account to hold deposits for people that wanted to contest a citation. What your committee asked was that during the consideration of this ordinance, you requested additional information regarding departments that would be impacted. You wanted to know whether or not the departments had been consulted on the ordinance, how they felt about it. You wanted to know what the implementation plan would be and things of that nature. So what we did is we talked to different departments. I have a list of the departments that were contacted: Animal Services, Building and Safety, Department of Transportation, Fire, Police, Housing, and Planning. And we asked them how they felt this ordinance would benefit their department. Most of the feedback was positive. I didn't hear from Fire and Police at that time. I have heard from City Attorney that they have been in consultation with Police. However, I did not receive any formal feedback from Police. We never heard back from Fire. Each department that did provide feedback did say that they would use this ordinance at their discretion, and it would be used on a case-by-case basis depending upon the violation. So it wasn't going to be just wholesale. It was optional for all departments, and they would use it as they seen fit in the field. What this report is recommending is it's recommending a 6-month pilot program with animal services. We do recognize that this ordinance has potential to not only strengthen the way that code enforcement is being enforced, but it does have a potential to help with cost recovery during this budget crisis that's occurring right now in the city. The reasons for a 6-month pilot are because there's a lot of additional pending items that still haven't been fully fleshed out from our point of view as far as the administration of the fund, how the departments are going to be reimbursed. There was some concerns from the departments. They wanted to make sure that they would be reimbursed appropriately. The City Attorney's Office also is exploring the idea of technology and how that might help them with this process. So we need to know what the cost is associated with that. We don't know what the general fund impact is. That's the bottom line at this point. So we wanted to be conservative, and we wanted to go slowly, and we want to make sure we do this right. And so that's why we suggested that it just be limited to one department rather than opening it up citywide. Another item is that this ordinance was actually approved for animal services specifically in last year's budget. However, because of this ordinance not being implemented and adopted appropriately, there was revenue that was associated with this with animal services budget that's not going to occur for this year. So there have been some other caveats that have held this back.
Now, what was the issue on we said the ordinance was not approved, or was approved and they didn't implement it, or in this year's budget?
This was actually part of Exhibit H for the Department of Animal Services. This is one of the mechanisms to increase their revenue and actually start enforcing the city's laws in regards to the dog licenses and to increase ongoing revenue for the department. Now, in order to do that, we needed, per California Government Code 53069.4, we were required to actually have a process set up where somebody who was issued the citation could appeal the citation. And we didn't have a process in place. And that's where the City Attorney's Office, moving forward with the ACE program, would set up that process. And then with the omnibus ordinance, which is pending in public safety again, that actually sets up the administrative citation penalties so that the department could move forward with actually enforcing and issuing citations for this program. It was just making sure that both ordinances moved forward on a parallel track and were adopted at the same time so that we could actually implement this program and make it successful.
Where did the background come for the connection with the dollars for the fines? How did we keep that?
The fine structure was based on looking at what other animal control departments around the city charged, and their actual charges were somewhere between $100 to $300 per citation. What the county does is the county actually goes out and has an animal control officer go out and issue citations for people who are not in compliance with the dog license ordinances. And that
they have an administrative program? Or yes. Is it their regular violation?
It's their regular. They do it as a misdemeanor and independent of the administrative citation. Now, the city has a $500 civil penalty on the books for failure to license your dog or obtain a renewal license. And because of the punitive nature of that penalty, it has not been enforced. So in the omnibus...
What's the reason it's not enforced?
The department felt that it was punitive.
Too punitive, okay.
So in the omnibus bill, we reduce the penalty down to $20, which is 100% of the actual cost to license your dog. And then as a secondary mechanism, the department could issue an administrative citation if the person further continues not to come into compliance with our laws. The revenue that was associated in the budget was $125,000, and that was based on the department issuing 100 citations per month and actually collecting on 40% of the citations.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier the two ordinances that you wanted to go parallel. Do we have a administrative hearing function now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, now where's that now?
The department has an administrative hearing program for barking dog complaints and some other quality of life issues.
Okay, so within animal services, they have a administrative function, a hearing function.
Correct.
Okay, do they have the capability of accepting evidence exhibits and keeping, in the sense of hearing records and transcripts? That's all in play?
Yes, sir.
And then the other ordinance was that you said we needed?
The other ordinance for the administrative citation is the ACE ordinance, which is in front of you today.
Okay. All right. So you needed both parts to move forward?
Correct. Now, the Board of Animal Commissioners last week approved revised penalty structures. Now, they were doing so on the basis that if the citation was a lower dollar amount, then they believe more people would comply and actually pay the citation. Unfortunately, if we reduce the citation from $250 to $100, the city would actually have to issue 1,250 citations and collect on all 1,250 citations in order to generate the same amount of money. And you can understand the additional amount of work that would be necessary to go about collecting that.
Okay. What other departments have a hearing process? Like the animal services?
What was that question? I'm sorry.
What other departments have a hearing process like animal services?
I believe building and safety has their own hearing process. So they would use this program,
DOT has one.
optionally.
And DOT?
Just on parking violations.
For parking violations.
Only, yeah, just housing.
So, would these, is building and safety DOT also be compatible for these types of hearings?
If the department wanted to opt into the program.
Okay, they wouldn't have to change ordinance or anything, they could just use the current hearing process.
As far as I know.
No, I think there'd have to be significant amendments, particularly with regard to Department of Animal Services, to incorporate those violations into different...
Oh, no, I'm just saying, animal services using their process for their violations. We could also with building and safety using their current process for their violations, and DOT using their process for their... Are they capable of assuming this workload and these responsibilities within their current hearing process, not taking on other people's hearings?
An ordinance would still have to be established to allow the departments to issue administrative citations.
Okay, I understand that, but I want to get back to the current existing hearing processes. Are they capable of assuming these responsibilities within those departments? Because I think one of the amendments here today is talking about expanding access to this ordinance to other departments. And the concern I have is how many departments have a hearing process that can accommodate that?
That we'd have to ask the departments if they can absorb that workload, is what you're asking, right? If they can absorb this administrative workload?
Or do they already, which of these they already do? Because I'm looking down this list, some departments only do some of these things on this list, not others. So does that require an ordinance change then to give them the authority to do other hearings on other violations?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, because that's what I thought when we had this before, when we asked to go back and look and see what the implementation strategies, that where they were going to require hearings, that we determine who could do these hearings within their department, what the costs would be, what would be the logistics. Because the thing that concerned me from the first reading was if you're going to have people have hearings, collect evidence, collect exhibits, subpoena, those types of things, are they in place if this ordinance goes forward? And if they're not in place, then, I don't know if LADOT or Building Safety or currently Animal Services can issue subpoenas. Do we know that? Because that's what the ordinance gives them the authority.
From my understanding is that the city attorney's office is the entity that would do the administrative hearing on behalf of those departments.
Okay, that's not clear. So Is that, to be a citywide hearing process? I mean, is that?
From my understanding, based on conversations with the city attorney's office, this ACE ordinance, this administrative citation program, would be managed by the city attorney's office, and they would have oversight over the program. However, they would only be conducting hearings for people that want to contest the citations.
So, I mean, but that's what the ordinance is. If you contest it, then they have to have a hearing. So you're saying now
And the city attorney's office would be the...
would assume all of those citywide?
Yes. That is my understanding from the city attorney's office, that they would manage the hearings themselves with the staff that they have. However, that's one of the issues one of the reasons why we want to limit it to one department, because we don't know how many departments will actually want to issue these types of citations. We don't know what kind of workload is going to be forthcoming for the city attorney's office, and if the workload becomes unmanageable, then they will probably need additional resources.
Okay, because it's not clear in the ordinance that they're assuming all that, so I'm glad you brought that up. So citywide hearings are done by the city attorney's office. Okay.
That's a horse of a different color.
Yeah.
All right, and then the other issue is, if I read this correctly, if a person doesn't agree with the findings of that hearing, their option is to go to Superior Court.
That would be the second level of review, yes.
Okay, and then what I'm not clear on then is that currently, if we went through the current process that we have for violations, we'd be going to court anyway. And so we're basically looking at, if people paid the administrative fee, it would be an interim step to keep some of them out of court, but eventually if they appeal, they would all go to court.
Originally, these citations would be heard at the Superior Court level, and then if they want to contest that, Tina, where would they?
It would be at the hearing level, right? Maybe that's...
Should I just jump in from the beginning here?
Okay.
I mean, what's contemplated is that this provides another enforcement tool for all of the enforcement agencies or regulatory departments in the city that enforce the municipal code. So in addition to issuing orders to comply or other types of warning or notices, the administrative citation would be another weapon, if you will, for enforcement entities. Upon receiving, in most cases, except for those cases which require a reasonable time to comply, particularly cases involving building or zoning code violations, which will be given time to comply. Most of the violations contemplated by by the proposal would result in a violator being issued a citation for the violation that exists. It's contemplated that the violator would correct or eliminate the violation, but would be required to pay a fine as set by the enforcement entity. So at that point, the citation can take one of two courses. The violator pays the fine, makes the corrections, and the enforcement agency is done. The city attorney is not involved in that procedure at all. If the violator contests the violation, there's an initial review which will be conducted by the city attorney's office to determine whether on the face of the citation there is significant or sufficient evidence to support the existence of a violation, in which case the violator would be notified that the city attorney has conducted an initial review. At that time, the violator would have an opportunity to pay the fine, correct the violation, or to challenge the citation and request further administrative review to be conducted under a program set up by the city attorney's office. It's contemplated that those hearings would be conducted by administrative law judges, or we've also been in discussions with the Superior Court to provide judge pro temps to conduct these hearings. I mean, it's significant to note that the violations that the enforcement entities will be out issuing administrative citations for are those same violations that they're out enforcing now. But those cases right now end up in Superior Court, typically as misdemeanor violations, in some cases alleged as infractions. I think it's also important to note that this is not limited to Housing Department, Building and Safety, Animal Services. LAPD is also would be entitled to issue administrative citations for very low-grade Muni Code violations.
Okay. And then what is the overall, have you figured out the cost of the hearings and what it would cost for the process with the Muni Court judges? Has that been factored in?
Well, the initial discussions were that the judges would be volunteer judges to handle these cases. In terms of the staffing inside the city attorney's office, our office has agreed that there'll be no additional staffing required to run this program.
And if I may add, William Carter, Chief Deputy. We also have with us Mary Claire Mullador. I believe there's also a representative of the Los Angeles Police Department here, and also the Housing Department, who've been here today to talk about ACE. As Tina has pointed out, the city attorney is not asking for any additional resources for this program. We already have an in-house program. It's a dispute resolution program. It's a hearing program. We review over 100,000 criminal cases a year. Currently, 17,000 to 20,000 of these cases come from code enforcement. They're LA Muni Code violations. We review almost 20,000 of those a year. About 6,000 to 7,000 of those end up in criminal court. So we are already doing this. So right now, instead of just only having one option, that is two options, do nothing or file criminal and make criminals out of some of these people, we will now have an option, a third option, that is to pursue an administrative option. And we think it's going to have more real-time compliance. We're already doing it now. We're already reviewing this. The letter won't say we're not going to do anything. It's now you've got a citation to pay. This is not a novel concept. This concept is in place in San Diego, Sacramento, Santa Monica. I know, Councilman Smith, this was a proposal that you suggested many years ago before I got here. Tina and MC actually went down to San Diego and met with their folks. They have about an 85% compliance. People pay those citations. It's that 15 to 20% that we'll have to deal with perhaps having a hearing. The city attorney's office supports this, strongly supports this, including the Councilman Koretz's motion. We think it allows real-time compliance. It's a force multiplier. We're not just stuck with criminal. We now have options for administrative. It's discretionary. The agencies don't have to do it. I can envision now a police officer or others out there, if they have a loud party or some other low-grade LAMC violation, they don't have to arrest that person. They issue a citation and say, I may be back, but you've got a citation now. Let's get this thing resolved. There's also, we'll use it with existing resources. We're already doing it now. We just only have one option, and that's criminal, and I don't think we should be using our resources, criminal prosecutors, on these types of violations and clogging up the courts. I think it's a great program.
Now, in logistics, have we created the citation? Is that already in play?
Well, we have citations in other departments that we're going to crib. It's a chicken and egg thing. I mean, how much resources do we put in up front before it's approved? If we have a pilot project, I think we can go slow and work with the CAO and other departments to see how we can manage this. I can let LAPD and housing speak for themselves, but we're already doing the paperwork.
Are you suggesting a pilot program versus this full-blown motion with everything?
Well, it's my understanding the pilot program, as I understand the Koretz motion, is it's going to be limited to certain types of violations.
Yeah, but it's a very long list compared to what animal services.
It's not as long as the LAMC code, but it's a start.
No, but I'm saying versus just the animal services component, which is the original recommendation.
Well, the original recommendation was broader. Then the CAO's report was narrow.
Right.
Councilman Koretz is a little broader. We believe in a broader pilot project, not just animal services. We support Councilman Koretz's motion, amendment.
So let me go back. So you got to create the citation, or it's already existing?
We would have to work with each of the departments to amend their existing citations.
They all have their own books.
Easy.
They all have their own citation books.
Yes.
They're different.
Yeah. And then, again, on the fine schedule, that's already set?
It's proposed in the draft ordinance. And first offense is $250, second $500, third offense in the same year is a $1,000 fine. There are 2 additional fee schedules relating to unpermitted work, as cited by the Department of Building and Safety, and also for illegal signs, as currently authorized under the municipal code.
And the penalties were obtained from other cities, other municipal codes where we did. Again, we didn't make this up. This was existing. We looked at the fines and penalty structures in other cities, and this is consistent with other cities. There's also a hardship exemption in the ordinance. And certainly what we would like is compliance, real-time compliance, because right now, we have to get a police report or another report, we file the case in Superior Court, it drags through the system, and then in the end, we may or may not get compliance.
Bill, and you're right, I did introduce this like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that, and it dealt primarily initially with building and safety. So you weren't here at the time, and in fact, these problems go back to Ira Reiner's days, some of this stuff, so it's not your fault. But when I had these discussions 5, 6 years ago, Building and Safety said, we would love to do this. Our biggest problem is the city attorney won't let us do this. And there's notice issues versus citation issues. And we can't just go give a citation right on the first site when we see something because city attorney won't let us do that. Now you're saying you're going to change that and let them do that so we can expedite the system? Or are you still going to require they wait 30 days, they give them an initial notice to comply before you cite?
The government code is very explicit that certain types of violation require a reasonable time to comply, particularly those violations which involve the building code or the zoning code. So an owner typically would need to pull permits, complete the work, have inspections, and get signed off. So it's not contemplated that that in the cases of those violations, that a citation would be issued at the first observation of a violation. They probably still be issued in order to comply, pull permits, comply within 30 days. If upon reinspection after those 30 days, then the issuance of administrative citation would be appropriate.
Okay, so on this list, how many then fall into that kind of a category?
Not many.
That's a list that we came off with. We were actually looking forward to working with whatever departments are approved within a proposal period to identify which would be the most appropriate violations to include in a pilot. So this
Well, I see a bunch on here. You told me years ago you couldn't do that. So now they're on this list all of a sudden. So I'm just trying to find out, is there an inconsistency in the city attorney's opinion on this?
I don't believe so. I think that particularly with regard to L.A.
Construction without a permit.
Construction without a permit.
That was one you told me years ago. You couldn't cite them on the site, on the spot. You had to wait you had to stop, wait 30 days. And if they objected, then they went to the Building Safety Commission, and it would take months and months and months, and we never got a citation for some of this stuff. So there's one right there I see. Violation related to vacant buildings, illegal use of land. There's another one. If they file a land use permit, the clock
They're
tolls.
entitled to due process.
Yeah,
They are entitled to due
So
process.
as we look at this list, this is not a solution to the problem. It's only a step in the right direction.
It's not, the due process timing on some of these violations will still be in place, but it allows the option at the end of that process. Some of these are real time. Some of these, as you see with LAPD, excessive noise, loitering, trespass, drinking in public, all of those would be real time. Some of the Department of Building and Safeties, you're still going to have built-in due process and other hearings, but at the end of that process, it's not just a criminal violation. It would be another administrative option.
Okay. Here's my concern, and again, I support the concept. I think it's the right direction to go. I'm not so sure we're ready to go full bore yet on it, because I don't think we really thought this through fully. We tried a process a couple years ago with the neighborhood prosecutors when we went into the police, building and safety, as I recall, public works, brought all their inspectors together and said, let's have a joint citation program, let's work together, and we will then be your city attorneys, we'll go forward on these things. And it fell apart because the departments wouldn't work together and wouldn't work with the city attorney. So we've kind of gone down this road once, didn't get anywhere. Biggest problem, again, is everyone tells me, it's not the judges necessarily don't want this in their court, they don't. It's the city attorney that doesn't want to file these little things because you don't have enough people. And you sat here in this committee just weeks ago saying, quit cutting us, we don't have any people left. You've told the police department we're going to stop doing some municipal citation stuff. We're not going to carry your load anymore, police department, on these municipal violations. And yet you're saying you could absorb this within your department. How can you do that when you keep saying we don't have any people left? I don't get it.
There's two issues here. One is we already have a hearing program because there are certain cases that you don't file. We have to review the case, And whether we file or not, we still have to do something. There'll be a hearing where you have neighbors that are going at each other or other kinds of problems. We still have a hearing process. We were going to do that whether or not we have sufficient number of prosecutors to be in court. We have a hearing process because a lot of these are already in place.
Okay, how do you get that to work? I've got one in my neighborhood. They've been going at each other for 4 years. Police department goes out every week. Sitting in your office. Nothing's resolved because one of the people won't ever show up to the hearing.
Well,
and you've got nothing.
You issue a citation.
What?
So you would administrative citation.
Yeah, administrative citation, and that forces them to do what?
They've either got to pay the citation, or now what you've got is you've got them in the system. We still have the option to file criminal, but this is incremental or progressive enforcement. It can't just be zero or criminal. This is incremental enforcement. And again, the concerns you raise are legitimate concerns, Councilman, on building and safety. Building and safety has a program in place. Last year, the city attorneys drafted kind of a mini ACE program for Department of Building and Safety. Getting away from Department of Building and Safety, we have other kinds of code violations that either nothing happens or we have to file criminal. Now, what happens is if we are going to pursue a criminal case, as you know, the LAPD is going to have to draft a report. They're going to have to send an officer, a filing officer, down to our office. They're going to have to submit it to us. We're going to have to review it. And if we file a criminal case, then it goes through the system, and who knows what happens. If the officer now has an administrative code option, he or she pulls out his citation book and says, that's a loud party, that's another violation that I'm not going to bring criminally, but I'm going to write you a citation. And you've got to pay that citation, just like a parking ticket or some other violation. We start that process, and if that process doesn't abate, now we've seen this person's got 1 or 2 citations. Now we may want to take it criminally, and we take it into court, and now the judge says, this guy's gotten 2 or 3 citations. Now it becomes more serious, and maybe the judge at that point says, I've got to hit this person with a little bit hard of a penalty or probation. Our resources are going to be static or drop. And we're going to have to focus our energies on more important criminal cases like domestic violence, sexual assault, and other thefts, because the district attorney's office is shedding even more cases. You think we have problems? They're shedding them to us, and things that should be felonies end up being misdemeanors because
that's the bigger problem. Everything gets
so
kicked
this
down.
is a way for us to steer. We've got 2 programs we're pursuing. One is ACE, which will allow us to push those 17 to 20,000 cases that way towards ACE. We're also going to pursue deferred entry of judgment, where we can move people completely out of the criminal system. Let's put you in a deferred entry of judgment program so we don't have to worry about you, and then we can focus on the core 50 or 60,000 cases a year that we have to focus on, because about 15,000 of those are usually felonies.
Okay, I want to support this. I'm going to support something. I just think we're rushing too far too fast, and I think you really need to focus. That's why I think a test program really is the right thing to do, because I think there's a lot of things out there you haven't figured out yet, and you're saying we're going to do this program, we're going to get the administrative law judges, or we're going to go to the court and get you haven't worked it out yet, and that's my problem. So I don't want to get into a program, and then you come back in and say we need 300 new attorneys because we just can't handle this load all of a sudden, and we're going, oh, great, we just wasted 6 months. So, I want to support some of Mr. Koretz, but I can't support your amendment because I think it's just too broad, too fast, too much. So I think we need to focus on 1 or 2 departments where it has a chance of success and work out the bugs before you roll it out citywide, and that's where I'm at today.
Let me ask one question. Do you have the ability with the 17,000 cases that you say come through and about 7 go to court, do you have the ability on the 10,000 that nothing happens to that you can turn into administrative fines or such without having to change the current process?
No, we don't have that authority.
So when you get it in there, like you can decide whether you file or whether it's a hearing.
It's either the only thing we can do with those cases, either we do not file them or we file them, or if there is some type of office hearing, we might be able to encourage the parties to pay restitution. Perhaps
I'm wondering if you
but
have,
not to the city.
Well, if you have 10,000 cases that flow and you're reviewing them, is there some legal prohibition that wouldn't allow you to create this administrative fine issue?
Yes.
What is that?
Under the code, we can't. Under the charter and under the LAMC, we can't. there's no authority for the city attorney to issue any kind of administrative sanction. It's all or nothing. It's either do nothing and/or file criminal. If the office hearing program is a way for us to take the pressure off LAPD and other departments that say you've got to bring these people in and talk to them. Remember when we had the recent issue with the protesters in the past, the city attorney used to put them through an office hearing process and talk to them.
You said the charter prevents you from creating an administrative fine from those
Correct.
types of hearings.
Correct. We do have discussions in office hearings to say perhaps you should pay restitution for that fence you knocked over. Sometimes they pay it, sometimes they don't, but not to us. It's
Mr. Chairman, if I may, that is a legislative power to establish that kind of civil remedy. As a prosecutorial office, we don't have the ability to change the manner in which we will pursue a violation other than through the authority that's given to us either by state law or through the legislative body.
But could the council give, as the legislation, give you the authority that you can convert hearings of this 10,000 cases you already get in hand into some type of a administrative fine?
If it does so explicitly enough, such as with the ordinance that's been recommended, or even with the narrow ordinance for particular programs, yes. But it has to be done in that detailed way.
Okay. Yeah, let me just ask a few questions, first of all. In concept, first I want to thank my folks who came from the Palisades and the Canyons and Brentwood to speak on behalf of this. I also want to thank those of my folks in my district who came up with contrary position. And I'd just like to start with what Jack Allen has handed us. I'd like an analysis of his report when we have a report back, if we're not ready to move forward today. Because when I turn to one of the issues that is a big one in my district, on his page 11, frankly, he throws up the notion of oversized fences. We have a law in the books that says 36 inches or 37 inches or whatever it is for a fence. In my district, it's been nothing but a Mideast conflict without any resolution. It's true. People will complain about a given neighbor. That given neighbor will have a building and safety inspector come in and cite them. On the block, there'll be 15 others, but since they weren't officially called or cited, the question is, why not me? Why them? What's the fairness issue? And so I can just tell you on that particular issue alone, if that's included, Jack is suggesting it is included. When I look at the sheet here, I don't see it specifically as listed as included, but if it can be construed to be part of this administrative fines and building and safety, you're opening up a can of worms that I don't think anybody in this room has an answer to and how to deal with it. So that's just a nitpicking one, but it's a significant one. Also, when I just look at LAPD issue, okay, just as an example, illegal vending at Venice Beach. Well, I've been on the council almost 6 years, and I've been talking about that until I'm blue in the face. It's been an issue for 25 years. Who, in God's name, is going to enforce this and follow through when building and safety or Rec and Park or LAPD, have other issues that they deal with? Makes it difficult. I don't want illegal vending on Venice Beach. I've been one of the screamers about the fact that you can buy the same stuff on the west side of the beach that people pay in the east side who pay taxes and do all these other things. It's an ongoing issue. I'd love a resolution of that. And I can go down to the gas leaf blowers. That's as much an issue to me as folks coming into my blue bin and taking material out. It's common and it's annoying. And I know Ruth Galanter put the law in the books. I'd love to know how that were to be enforced in this. I would like to ask a lot of questions like a building and safety, ask them to come up, explain how they go forward with it. And I think there's some valid issues, and there's no question about it. When I see the leadership from my district here who are engaged in community issues, gung-hoing for it, I'm gung-ho for it. But there's a lot of details that are unclear, and I don't even know where the human power will be to go forward in enforcing it and which ones to enforce. And that's why I'm just having some problem. Loud and racketeering noise. I mean, probably we have cops down with meters trying to figure out decimal levels on amplifier systems. Better yet, the way you deal with that. Obviously, drinking or urinating, these are easier. I'm just saying that there's a list here that I'm just not too sure how we go about it, but at the same time, I obviously care about the quality of life that my constituents, came here as well. please.
Well, if I may, those laws are already on the books. Every one of these laws is already on the books.
I know.
Anyone who is violating these laws is already committing a crime.
Sure.
So you are not creating new crimes.
I understand. So what does this do for you that you don't have now?
What this does is, again, the provisions that are on this list are representative of the types of violations that the council and others can consider. We would, as Tina said, we would work with the departments as to which types of violations they think are better to fall within the ACE program.
I see.
These are representative. I don't believe they're exclusive. They're representative of the types of violations we can look at. Again, all of them are already on the books. What the proposal creates is another option to allow for progressive enforcement. Right now, any one of these can be charged as a misdemeanor, 6 months or 6 months in jail or a maximum of 1 year in jail. The question now is whether this city is in fact enforcing the law now. I would submit to you that the city is not enforcing these laws uniformly across the city.
There's no question about it. And I can tell you of some folks in my district that call me maybe every day and have for 5 years. One in particular calls me about a particular area in my district that has issues. And it's this particular individual versus hundreds of homeowners in the neighborhood there. This person has said to me over and over, code enforcement is a solution to deal with your budget deficit. Well, you want to create World War III or Civil War on given blocks or neighbor against neighbor? That's part of the unfortunate consequence. Mr. Smith and I talked about when I first got on the council about that hedge issue and how to deal with it. And I really, frankly, I don't have any easy answers for some of the laws that exist that are hard to enforce or put one neighbor against the other. I'm just trying to figure out how we can...
I don't see this as a revenue generation issue. I see this as a real-time compliance issue. Is this a city of laws? Is this a city of lawlessness? Are we going to enforce our laws or not? It's very rare, I think, for a prosecutor, which I am, to get up here and say, give me another option besides criminal. What I am saying is give the city enforcement people another less onerous option. It's progressive enforcement so that there's a force multiplier. So when someone sees something, says, I don't need to spend all day writing a report now, referring this to the city attorney and then going through the courts, I'm going to write you a citation. I still have the discretion not to do that. I issue a citation and say, you better take care of this problem. You still have due process, but we're not making criminals out of these people. I've heard people say it's going to be neighbor against neighbor. They can do that now. They can point the criminal finger at somebody. But now there are other options. There's a due process here, and if this is a city of laws, then perhaps we can enforce the laws in a reasonable way, and so that the city has real-time compliance, whether it be a pilot project, whether it be one or all of these departments, but the city attorney's office feels that just limiting it to the animal services is not going to be the appropriate way to enforce this. Every other major city in this state already does this.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is an obvious issue. The need is obvious. We're very short on resources. We don't have prosecutorial resources. The courts are clogged. Our enforcement is shrinking. I think the idea makes perfect sense. They're already going through these cases. They're already citing them. The question is, how can we do this in an intelligent way? And I think they have a pretty effective collection process in this particular case. I think they'd be able to put liens on properties. I think it's a pretty workable system. There's a couple of things I'd suggest. One is, I think we want to know the exact, in this pilot, and Bill, I probably want you to pay attention to this because I want your feedback on it.
My attorney's giving me advice.
One thing I think is we should approve the final list. I don't think this should just be a representative sampling and you go and decide you'll add overheight fences and bushes to it. I think we want to pick a list that we all consider pretty non-controversial. I'm not sure if you added 6-foot-high bushes to this list, that the result would be one that we'd really want to see. I don't know if we're ready to see massive enforcement of every fence and bush in the city. It actually could be a problem. So I think when you have a final list, when you finalize it with whatever department, I think it should come back to the council for approval to make sure it's something that we think makes sense. Because I wouldn't want to put every single code in the city in this basket. I think it's a pretty good list, but I want to be careful there's not something that we think turns into a huge headache for us.
We're not going to do anything without the council's approval, obviously.
So I would
We're not
have
going to
us
add
come
anything
back
to
to
that.
formalize whatever your list is. The other thing I think might make some sense, Mr. Smith's commentary about taking on too much, maybe we should approve these, but have you do them one at a time, rather than simultaneously trying to implement all these departments.
Sure, yeah.
So, pick the one that makes the most sense first. Maybe it's LAPD. Do that first. Fully implement it. Come back to us with a report on how it's going. If that works, then you go on to the next one. And hopefully, in the course of a full year, you would be able to implement all of this. I don't want to see it just animal services, because I think it's actually, number one, the most problematic on the list rather than the best. And two, I think it would be a really minimal test, and I don't think we'd be that impressed with the results of one tiny department's tiny project. So I would move this item with those two suggestions, that we get a finalized list before anything's implemented, and that you go a department at a time. But I think this is so absolutely necessary. There's so many cases that we don't touch because we don't want to do them as a criminal prosecution, and when we do bring them to court, and I know this was happening in the other city that I represented too. If you're in a situation where you have something that you want to prosecute, but it's too minor, you go to court, you finally bring that one to court, and it's laughed out of court because it really is too minor. They shouldn't be let go, but they really shouldn't clog up the court's time. So I think it's a great proposal. I didn't realize you were doing this years ago, but it's about time, and especially in a time of such financial difficulty, it really is about time.
Yeah.
So I would move this item with those two suggestions, with the amendment as suggested, but that we do it one at a time, and that the list come back to us for a final approval.
I was actually going to make that amendment, so as long as you're proposing it, amendment to your own motion, I'll second your amendment to your amendment.
And we do have a representative of LAPD and housing here. Are there any other questions?
Councilman, may I speak on behalf of the Department of Animal Services?
Please do.
So we talked about the broad concept of looking at the city's administrative citation program, but originally last year in the budget process, this started with them. And then the city attorney's office said, this would be an issue if each department goes ahead and creates their own administrative citation program. There's no consistency or anything else. So it went from the one department to the broad, and then we wanted to make sure that the department was part of the pilot program, because this is the program that we were trying to create on their behalf in order to generate revenue as well as bring people in compliance with the license ordinance.
And then they backed off. That's the problem. Well, so financially, it won't work unless we tell the commission no.
Unfortunately, there was a misunderstanding between the penalty structure that was in the ACE ordinance and the penalty structure that was actually proposed for the omnibus. Now, I rushed down here because the department was actually meeting with Miguel, and they were discussing this. And the department is on board with the $250, $500, and $1,000.
Yeah. The problem is their commission's active, so we would have to reject the commission recommendation.
And that is what we were going to recommend doing in terms of the omnibus ordinance, which is back before public safety. We would recommend rejecting the recommendation from the Board of Animal Services and moving forward with the original recommendations, which is consistent with.
And I got no problem with that in this term of public safety. I'll see we move that. But I think we're discussing which departments and where we start and then gradually move through that. And I think Mr. Koretz's idea is a good one. Maybe it could be Animal Services if we reject then their recommendation. And I would suggest LAPD, as you did, because it has the most vibrant citation program there is. You don't have to really reinvent the wheel over there. So those are two departments we might want to start with then.
No, I'd add them to the ones that I suggested
You wanted to start with police and what?
I'd add it back, but I would ideally leave it up to the city attorney to select the first one. But I'm perfectly open to animal services.
I prefer to start with just PD because there's a very target-rich environment there.
I'll second that.
And it's got a system already in place that's very easy to utilize for you because the reporting system is already there, the city attorneys are already there, the citation program is already there, you've got 1,000 people in the streets every single day doing it, so it makes the most sense, and we can then tell the Animal Services Department, slow down a bit, you guys got it wrong, we need to work this out, and come back, maybe that would be the second one we'd look at.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Comment, housing has an automated system that we might be able to plug into as part of the pilot program.
I mean, it's already, code enforcement in general for housing, that's always been an area that's pretty commonplace, that you expect these types of hearings to occur in the first place. They don't go into the realm of criminal activity with LAPD. And I would think housing is one of them that should probably be there, whichever other ones you choose. But I think that already has some structure in place.
Well, could we do this and just suggest before this comes to council, we don't have a place setting right now. Why don't we ask the city attorney to come back and rate the departments in the progression you would like to see us move down the list? You tell us which has the easiest conversion for you to make.
If I may, I would sort of echo that, because I think that's important. We have the city attorney and we have us, but we don't really have all the departments to really talk about some of the details.
Some departments have a vibrant system, some don't. You could talk to them, see how easily you could convert quickly over, and then you rank them and we'll move down that list accordingly.
And if I may, this would require a revised ordinance in any event, so we can incorporate it as part of the revision to the ordinance, assuming that there's one direction that you give us in that regard. We can incorporate a section addressing that and list the department.
If you can tell the city attorney that, that'd be good.
Sure. There's two other amendments I think we need to make sure of. Is that number one, if we can explore this issue of the cases that come to the city attorney and give that option as it relates to those, instead of yes, no hearing, is to create the legislative intent that the city attorney's office can convert those into administrative fines.
Yes, I believe that and we'll look at that further, yes. Okay. What we've done is we've built some flexibility actually to go the other way, something that comes administratively. If it's serious enough, we've written into the ordinance the ability to charge it criminally if necessary. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
Okay. And the second one is that although I agree that we have this compliance fund, the one thing I think has to be clarified or restated is that it's got to be under the control of the council as opposed to the city attorney.
If there's any doubt about that, it'll be clarified. It was written by me so that
I ripped that page out as soon as I saw it.
Well, it was written by me very clearly stating that it was not to revert and it was subject to transfer only as council and mayor action.
No, but we need the fund under the control of the city council.
I'm sorry? It is.
Okay, I think one of the pages I read said it was.
I'll confirm that, but it is.
And just to clarify, that fund is just in case someone wins an administrative hearing and they're supposed to be refunded their money, right? So isn't that just sort of a holding fund?
That was the only exception.
We're talking about the fees the fines that are paid.
Those are clearly under the control of the city council. The only exception to that was if there was a deposit made that might have to be refunded, that could be refunded without council authorization because it was required to be refunded anyway. But that's the only instance.
Clean those up for us.
And then also I presume that because this is now a legal process, that there will be no opt-in, opt-out options by council members saying, oh, don't enforce that in my district because then you don't have an equal enforcement across the city. So whatever you choose to do, it's done everywhere equally. Otherwise, just submarine this in a later court.
It may come as a shock, but it's standard advice by our office that a council member alone cannot direct city staff. It's council acts as a body only.
Great advice. I'm not so sure it's taken, but great advice.
Can I clarify something? So is it the city attorney's position that we could have moved in this direction simultaneously and still handle this? I mean, we're moving in the direction of doing it department by department, but your position is that we could do these all at once still? No.
Yes, I think we could.
Okay.
The initial proposal, yes. We believe the city attorney could handle all departments, starting from day one. But obviously, we're supportive of the amendments as proposed by Councilman Koretz and then seconded by Councilman Smith.
I actually started my legal career doing code enforcement for several cities, and as a contract, we worked for a private law firm that contracted with cities for the code enforcement and other items, and some cities utilized the hearing process, administrative hearing process, others were dependent on the courts to resolve maintenance issues of homes and commercial buildings, et cetera. Night and day, the hearing process, a lot more efficient. We did a lot more of them. Cost the cities less, they build our city, our law firm a lot less, and so it is, I'm surprised that we're now as a city ourselves heading in this direction. It's something we must do, you know.
And one other thing, if we could look at the ordinance, it's not clear in the ordinance that all the hearings will be done by the city attorney's office, and we need to clarify that, because in reading it, it gives a clear impression, at least from my reading, that every department was going to have their own hearing process.
We'll clarify that. The one exception, I think, to that is there is a hearing process that DOT has for parking citations. And I think that is working very well, it's very, very smoothly, and I don't think that it's intended to change that. So, but other than that, yes, it was contemplated.
There's also contracts, private
Correct.
vendor contracts.
Correct.
on that, so we can't.
Correct. So it was contemplated that the city attorney would handle all others, and we'll make sure of that.
All right. Any other questions, colleagues? So if we would, if I understand what we just done, is that we would approve the CAO, no, we would move the ordinance with the amendments as stated by Mr. Koretz, verbal and written amendments, and that we would also, with the direction given by the different members of the committee as they formulate the final draft of this ordinance, with the understanding that the department has been given direction to, upon finalizing their list of departments, to then come back to the council for approval and initially implement them by department, and also the clarity on a variety of issues that were given to you today. Okay.
Now, in terms of the forwarding the ordinance, does it go directly to council with these changes, or shall
I think you can do that. The key is that I think it's, we capture all these themes.
Right.
And so it comes directly to council, and we can deal with it. It wouldn't slow it down. But I think you got to capture all these things.
And I would suggest that once we have an implementation begun, once you're actually starting to do this, that you have either a monthly or bi-monthly report back on the status of it, because this could go sideways real fast if we're not working together with the city attorney on this.
Correct.
Hand in hand. Okay.
I think the worst thing that could happen is if we don't do a good job out the door, and we'll lose credibility right away. We don't want that to happen.
And one other thing, if somewhere in the preamble, we've heard different scenarios. One, it's not a revenue generator, and other people think it is. I think we have to clarify that. If it's to solve the problem, often it doesn't generate the revenue we thought. And so that later it's not an audit that comes back and says it's not making any money. It's either going to solve the problem or we're out to raise revenue, and I think it's to solve the problem.
In our minds, the problem is a public health and safety problem.
The issues
That's what we're addressing.
In the preamble, we should say something to the effect that this is a problem-solving technique as opposed to a revenue-generating.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so with those directions, we'll move item, 11. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, what do we have left?
Item 12.
Item what?
12.
12.
Okay, this is the CAO report relative to evaluation criteria for the request for qualifications for underwriting services for the city's bond programs.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Otto from CAO office. On January 24th, Budget and Finance requested the CAO to provide a list of criteria to evaluate the request for qualification for underwriting services. This report lists 8 components in which the selection panel will use to evaluate the proposals. They are, number 1, public finance experience relating to the pool they're applying for. 2, personnel assigned. We'll ask them to provide a list of personnel that will play an active role in the financing. 3, the underwriting capacity. Firms will be required to demonstrate their underwriting capacity to support the city's bond financing. Underwriting capacity is a maximum amount of financial risk in dollars the firm is willing to assume in the event the firm is unable to find investors to purchase the bonds. 4, we'll ask for them to provide license and registrations to show proof that they can be an underwriter. 5, we'll ask them to provide information regarding any fines or suspensions or investigations or litigation by the SEC. 6, we'll ask them to submit city contract forms, and they must agree to comply with the city standard provision. 7, location. We're going to ask the firms to demonstrate the physical presence in Los Angeles. 8, the corporate citizenship. Firms will be asked to provide information demonstrating the roles in the communities they serve, such as charitable programs or scholarships. In addition to the information I just listed, we will also ask the firms to provide their lending activities in relation to the proposed banking ordinance.
Go over that again now? I didn't hear that last piece.
Excuse me?
I didn't hear the last thing you said. You said in addition you were going to ask something else.
Yeah, in addition, we'll be asking the firms to provide information regarding their lending activities in the commercial banking side in relation to the proposed banking ordinance.
Okay, that's what we're going to do as it relates to the issues of the responsible banking?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll only ask them to provide the information. We're not going to use it
Okay.
to score them.
All right. But you're going to give them criteria so we're not ending up with voluminous material that we can't decipher? I mean, you're going to give them some guidelines of what we're going to ask them for?
Right.
Okay, all right.
And then we plan to come back to council in early June with our recommended firms.
Let me just ask a couple of questions on the issue. You covered responsible banking, and then we just got the report today that lists, since we've gone to the bench process, these are the agencies or companies that are getting the business. The other thing is that there was one area that we keep getting questions about, and I don't quite know how to deal with it. Companies will come to us with ideas, and they complain that once they turn them over and we send them to the CAO's office, they become an RFP. And so they constantly say, why would I bring you something that now I have to compete with? What we were wondering, do we have the ability that if once you secure people on the bench and they come with an idea that you work with them on the implementation of that as opposed to always sending everything to RFP as relates to the meaningfulness of it? So that's the one piece that we get asked all the time and we have no answer for.
Yeah, Natalie Brill at sales office. A lot of time, underwriters and brokers come to us with ideas that either we've already thought of or that we have already thought of to RFP. If there are ideas that come to us, we go out to RFP. We go out to RFP broad enough so that if somebody does have a good idea, it's proprietary. We don't want to discourage any of the underwriters from bringing us ideas. So, I mean, that's really your instruction. Your instruction to us has been to go out to all the firms when we go out to RFP. But, you know, if there's a firm that comes to us with an idea that we think is a good idea, we can bring it to you. We just, you know, because technically they're qualified already.
Yeah. Well, what I'm concerned about, and again, we've gone to the RFP, but what I'm concerned about, and again, a lot of people have ideas that you've already been working on, and you discount that. But if somebody has a unique idea and they're part of the bench, is it something that a process that you can do to work with them on their idea without having to go to RFP? Because you've already gone to RFP and vetted them.
Correct. Technically, yes, we could.
Okay. And that's what we'd like you to look at and see. I don't want to violate the law and all that other stuff, but is there a way
We can do that.
that you can, basically, if it's a good idea and it's worth researching, that you can sit down with that company and work through it without saying, great idea, I'm going to send it out to RP, and everybody get a shot at your good idea. That's the one piece of the puzzle.
I mean, for example, we had a few good ideas come to us recently, and in one of the RFPs that we did, we sent it out, and we said, okay, these are all the things we want you to qualify for, but the last question is, do you have anything innovative that you would like to share with us, knowing that there was a firm out there who had come to us? But we knew it wasn't the only idea out there, so we wanted to not only get back the idea of the firm that came to us, but also to see what everybody else was thinking.
No, I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
I think those are the judgment calls that you have to make.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just ask a couple other things that we have pending motions. Now, I didn't see anything explained as to, there was one motion from Mr. Alicant about if someone's in the lawsuit, never let them play again, and yet we know that there are times with letters of credit and such that we must keep people in the process. So is that an understanding in the sense of the criteria?
Yeah, it would be very difficult for us to not deal with any of the banks or the firms that was currently involved in the litigation. It has to do with the letters of credit, and it also has to do that one of them, Wells Fargo, is our bank. So we're allowing them to be our bank, but we're not allowing them to participate in the pool. So that's our issue, is that if the city council decides that you don't want to deal with any of these firms, you'll have to ask the city attorney, one, if A, you can do that, and B, you're going to have to go to RFP for banking services, because technically Wells Fargo, you know, I don't know what the answer to the question. It's a really hard question.
Nobody does.
No, but I think the thing is, if they're on the bench, we can, if they're on the bench, we can still make judgments about it.
But the simple answer is every single one of the big banks have very serious violation issues right now with the federal government. And even a lot of the bond people have big issues right now because the rules have changed. So do you now hold that against?
Allegedly.
Well, no, the rules are changing
Right.
because of the financial crash that was brought about by banking practices. The problem is every one of them were guilty. Not one
Allegedly.
of them. Okay. No, you can say allegedly. I'm going to say every one of them was guilty. And I'm not concerned whatever about being sued about that, because I have the city attorney to defend me. But every one of them did it. And so you put these people on the bench, there's nothing left. I mean, we can go to Banco Santander or something like that, you know.
I mean, our concern, and the councilmen are concerned with the letters of credit. I mean, the variable rate program right now is, even with the letters of credit, close to 1%. We're paying, 1 week is what, 0.18%? So we're paying 1.18% on like $100 million. I mean, that's kind of hard to beat. And, you know, it makes it difficult for us to say to you, yes, cancel all the letters of credit and go on a fixed rate, when fixed rate is going up. I mean, we just had that discussion this morning because we met for general obligation bonds, and rates are going up.
Yep. But I think the issue, we've pretty well discussed letters of credit, big volume deals, those things you can't avoid. But again, we've also shown that over time that on the smaller deals, they can be split up to smaller firms and things of that nature, that we can have a variety of people that benefit from underwriting. So, but again, I think you've covered them in the sense of those issues. But the thing I just want to make sure that we've at least looked, because I think it's coming back on a report from the CAO about the banking responsibility motion, and then somewhere you'll plug in there how you considered it on this RFP, and I think this document pretty well covers our request of, in fact, could you make sure that Mr. Cardenas gets this, because he's got some responsibility on the policy issue.
We'll put a cover memo on it and send it
so
to
that
you.
he sees, because that was his motion, and I think that covers about what we have. And we don't need to send this any further because it was just information prior to the RFP going out. Okay? Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
Oh.
Okay,
Can we add one more thing? What we just passed out for the From July 2008 to November 2010, we've issued 21 bonds, and of 21 bonds, 3 were competitive, 18 were negotiated, and
Oh, this is
7
the recap?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. This will be in the memo.
Let's be in the memo?
yeah.
Okay, if you do the memo.
What do you want to point out?
18 of the 18 negotiated, 7 issuance were from the large firms, were the senior managers, and 11 of the issuances, medium-sized to small firms were the senior managers. So it's pretty spread out in terms
So
of.
we're going to get, you'll just did a cover sheet on that?
Yes.
Thank you.
But we wanted to give you the information.
I appreciate that. Let me just say, we have 2 public comment, Mr. Weiss and Dr. Weissman. 2 public comment.
For clarification, is the committee recommending to note and file the CIO's report?
Yes.
Thank you.
On this last,
Yes.
note and file that, and this information that we asked before they went out to the RFP.
Okay, well, I lost 2, I got 3 left. I'll take
Got
it.
a quorum, babe.
I'll take it.
Well, the microphone's in the restroom.
Thank you. Microphone in the restroom, right, I know. I've heard that one before. Okay.
That's true, it counts.
No, that's, Rule 24 says you got to be in the chambers. This is in the bathroom stuff doesn't count. Change the rule, otherwise follow the rule. Okay, but here's my public comment. Today, Janice Hahn's Watts Gang Task Force, there was the county supervisor, a gentleman by the name of Michael Giacano. He's the chief, he wasn't a county supervisor, sorry, he's the chief attorney. He was from the Board of Supervisors, the county, okay? Chief attorney, Office of Independent Review. Now, this was in the context of law enforcement. I'm advocating, and I'm going to continue to advocate. Whether it ever sees the light of day, I don't know, but it's a good idea. A public advocate for the city of Los Angeles. Also, a whistleblower protection law, okay? In the context of the Watts Gang Task Force, they were talking about police complaints against the sheriff, public complaints against the sheriff. This is an independent office. It's completely independent of the DA. It's completely independent of the county council, and it investigates these officer-involved shootings. And you know what? It keeps the peace. It produces justice. The point is, it's an independent, if you will, Chinese wall set off from in this case, it would be the city attorney separated from the public advocate. For example, just on the motion that you just heard, okay, what was represented here wasn't completely accurate. The city attorney has independent options. It's not prosecution or nothing, okay? They're independent. You don't have that information other than maybe one from the public once in a while. You need a public advocate combined with a whistleblower protection law. Most importantly, apart from that, to give you fraud, waste, and abuse opportunities. Let's say in these citation situations, let's say somebody comes across, like the building and safety inspectors that were just found out to be committing crimes. The city attorney to investigate it because he says he can't, so the feds basically take care of it. If you had a public advocate with subpoena power, that would basically come out. As part of all of these procedures that you're going to try to initiate with this new level of bureaucracy, you're going to uncover fraud, waste, or abuse. What's going to happen? City attorney's going to be involved. Guess what? Nothing. So we're missing out on an opportunity here. And by the way, and one final comment on these police abuse situations, okay? The millions of dollars that you guys pay out on that, or the millions of dollars that the city, is exposed to by way of liability, an independent public advocate, even if you just limited it to what the county board of supervisors does on its level with this, what they call Office of Independent Review, I would call it Office of, you would start saving the public money, and you would be getting at the crux of the problem. And more importantly, as a result of these investigations, they find ways to solve the problems going forward. In other words, they find, hey, this is what caused it the first time. We want to prevent these from happening again. So that's just my pitch, and I'm sticking to it. Huh?
Although it's a different name, there's an operation within the police department that's their audit function that does the identical function within LAPD. Came out of the consent decree.
Except under the consent, except the LAPD for some reason isn't there. It's not. Well, you know what? I'll check into it even more. I will. Yeah.
Over the years, what the cost of litigation has gone up or down.
It's called what? What's it called again?
It's the audit. What is it? It's the audit function within professional standards. Is the audit function within, I think, their professional standards. But it came out of the consent decree. They do the same deal, looking, and they have a risk management, they do the same thing.
I want to expand it citywide for non-LAPD, that's the point, but it's, okay, thanks.
But Ray's gonna do that because we gave it to him in the budget a while back. But CAO was